Hi and welcome back everybody to another reaction video where we try to learn something new and to spread history on YouTube. Okay, so today we have the video called World War II from OverSimplified. OverSimplified is mentioned all the time in my comment section. If you want a video to get covered by me, just put it in the comment section below and I will probably eventually come to that video. But yeah, I like OverSimplified. They make really great videos. And as always, the original video is going to be in the description below. Go give them a view and a like. And also, as always, I'm going to give my commentary and additional information that I have on the topic that we discuss. And you all know that I like to hear your opinions in the comment section. And also, please comment if you have something to say about that topic, about this topic. But I decided to also conduct polls in my future videos. So during the video, you're going to have pop-ups like in the top, I think it's left corner of the video, or on your side, like top right, with questions, and then you can answer them. And then you can see also what other people answered. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting that way, just to see what other people think about some additional questions that I pose. Okay, without further ado, let's jump into the topic, or into the video.
It's 1902. A young man by the name of Benito Mussolini moves from Italy to Switzerland to avoid military service. He gets big into socialism, working for trade unions, writing for socialist newspapers, advocating a violent overthrow of European monarchies, the whole shebang. This gets him in a bit of trouble with the Swiss police, so he gets arrested, sent back to Italy, set free, returns to Switzerland, is arrested again, goes back to Italy again, completes his military service after previously avoiding it, and then after a brief stint as an elementary school teacher, he finally returns to work as an avid socialist. His speeches and journalistic abilities made him famous among Italian socialists. He was anti-war, so when Italy colonized Libya in 1910, he rioted and got arrested. Then World War I came along, and once again he protested Italy's involvement. But then he thought, wait a minute, this war could bring about the social climate needed to overthrow European monarchies and bring about the socialist revolution everywhere. And suddenly he was pro-war, but his fellow socialists didn't like...
Yeah, the thing, I think it's quite known that Benito Mussolini was actually anti-war and a socialist in his early age. But then he noticed that because of war, the true face of capitalist states would be shown, and that the people would make a revolution. So he changed his stance on pro-war, and that is also actually later on some of the main ideas of Stalin and Lenin and other leaders who wanted to overthrow governments around the world and in their states and so on. They said, if a war happens between capitalist states, then the general population, because of the starvation, because of the casualties, because of the poverty, the economics and so on, then the general population is going to riot against the establishment, let's call them that way, or the capitalist or whatever, and then a revolution can happen. So he changed his mind from against war to being pro-war, because it would bring up change.
Like his new pro-war stance, so they kicked him out of the party. So then he said, you know what? I'm done with socialism. We need something new, not based on class divisions tearing us apart, but based on unity through nationality. We'll conquer the Mediterranean and reunite all Italian peoples, just like the days of the Roman Empire. I'll call it fascismo, and it will guide the Italian nation to greatness. That's all well and good, Mr. Mussolini, but what kind of haircut am I giving you? Let's go with... bold.
Yeah, regarding the word fascismo, it comes from the Italian word fasci, which is like this is now oversimplified, like sticks that surround an axe, a two-headed axe, and it symbolizes like the unity, like all the sticks are holding the axe like together, and they're and the sticks are like wrapped around, and all the sticks are similar in length and so on. So it would symbolize like the unity of the ethnicity or the nation and so on.
Italy had been on the winner's side in World War I, and they hoped they were going to get a lot out of it, but in the end, they only got a little, and they felt cheated. On top of World War I, and they hoped they were going to get a lot out of it, but in the end, they only got a little.
Yeah, the Italian idea back then was always, not always, but most of the time, to gain all the territories that were lost after the fall of the Roman Empire. So, and it's of course all the territory surrounding the Mediterranean, but of course they were more focused on the neighboring states or the neighboring territory. And as you can see, this is Tyrol, Istria, this is parts of Slovenia, and here's a bigger chunk that they wanted, like Dalmatia in today's Croatia, and the territory of the former Dubrovnik Republic. That's also in today's Croatia. So as you can see, they wanted a whole bunch of it, and technically they should have deserved it, let's say it that way, because they were on the winning side and because of the treaties back in that age. But they only got a smaller portion of the territory. And of course they weren't satisfied with it, because this territory was later on annexed to the state of Slovenes, Croats, and Serbs, and later on the kingdom of Yugoslavia and so on. But yeah, they were saying, hey, we were on the winning side, we were fighting like the Austro-Hungarians on the Italian front, and we gained almost nothing. So it was kind of frustrating for them. But
little, and they felt cheated. On top of that, a bad economy and weak governments meant that the Italian people were a little unhappy. So when Mussolini came along and said that he could fix everything, his fascist movement gained a lot of support. In 1922, he went to the king and said, "Make me prime minister, or I'll make me prime minister." And the king said, "You and what army?" "This army." Fair enough. Then he went about establishing a dictatorship with himself at its center. Europe had its first fascist dictator. Next up, Germany.
Yeah, with Il Duce. Means in Italian the leader, and later on Hitler took the title of Führer, which also means leader, and you can see a lot of similarities between like Mussolini and Hitler, and how Mussolini influenced Hitler, and how Hitler wanted to copy Mussolini with the speeches, with the stances when he talks, with also the title. And a lot of stuff that Hitler was known for, he actually adopted from Mussolini. That's very interesting.
Germany had been on the loser's side, and they got absolutely wrecked by the Treaty of Versailles. They lost territory, had to demilitarize the Rhineland, had to reduce their army to just 100,000 men, couldn't have an air force, had to pay the Allies a huge amount of money that it didn't have, and a new rule was established that every Englishman withheld the right to walk into the center of Berlin, pick out any German they wanted, and spank the hell out of them. I made that last one up, but it helps you understand how all this felt to Germans. On top of that, a bad economy and weak governments meant that when a small angry man with a silly mustache came along and said that he could fix everything, the German people loved it. Hitler had been a soldier during World War I, and he was crazy patriotic, and nobody was madder than him about Germany's humiliation. He helped start a new political party, and in 1923 attempted a march on Munich with his boys. And then he got arrested. But his popularity grew and grew, and in 1933, the president made him chancellor. He believed he was Germany's great destined savior, and he went full megalomaniac, establishing a dictatorship with himself at its center. Europe had fascist dictator number 2. Hitler and Mussolini had a lot of the same ideas, but more...
Yeah, as we saw in the Hitler video that I covered, the Versailles Treaty, all the Germans felt like they were humiliated because they were blamed for the war. They lost, as you saw, a lot of territory, and they also lost territory where ethnically, in some territories where ethnically the Germans were the majority, and also because of the war reparations. And the Germans were very angry because of that. And then on top of that, there comes the Great Recession and everything. So as the economics and the times and everything went more and more bad or worse, so did Hitler's popularity rise. So when the situation was worse, Hitler's popularity and the numbers and the votes he received grew.
More importantly, they had the same enemies, and they started to get along. Anyone else want to be friends? Franco? No? You good?
Yep.
I do. Who's that? It's Japan.
Yeah, Franco and Spain were actually neutral during the Second World War. They didn't officially declare war on anybody, but they were in the Spanish Civil War, which is overlooked many times in history, but is very important. Like the Germans and the Italians helped the Franco regime to establish, and the famous bombing of Guernica. I'm not sure how it's pronounced in Spanish, but yeah, the famous painting of the bombing. But yeah, then they turned to Japan.
Want to be friends? Franco?
No.
You good? I do. Who's that? It's Japan, and they've taken over northern China. Let's rewind a bit. Japan had isolated itself from the rest of the world for over 200 years until the Americans showed up and said, you're going to trade with us and you're going to like it. Then the Western powers imposed a bunch of unequal treaties, meaning Japan's economy was bust. They also had no natural resources, so they decided to go get some. They went to war with China to gain a sphere of influence over Korea.
Yeah, Japan not having natural resources, especially oil, and they're an island nation like Great Britain, and they depend on their navy. And to run ships, you need oil. So oil was actually throughout the Second World War and before the Second World War officially started, a big issue for the Japanese.
And they took a bunch of China's stuff. But then the West said, hey, cut that out. And since Japan couldn't take on the West, they said, okay, I guess we'll just go home. Wait a minute, what are you doing? Taking advantage of a weakened China and setting up spheres of influence. But I was the one who weakened them. We know. And you guys didn't let me have anything. We know. That seems unfair. We don't think so. Okay, see ya. So Japan thought, screw this, and went to war with Russia, and stunned everyone by actually winning. Then they fully annexed Korea, but they didn't stop there. In World War I, they took Germany's colonies and islands in Asia, and returned home victorious, waving a signed piece of paper in the...
Sorry?
Okay, see ya. So Japan thought, screw this, and went to war with Russia, and stunned everyone by actually winning. Then they fully annexed Korea, but they didn't stop there. In World War I, they took Germany's colonies and islands in Asia, and then in an incident that was maybe staged by the Japanese army.
Yeah, and the Germans weren't that angry about Japan taking those islands, because Germany didn't have like a big navy, and they couldn't control all the islands that were so far away. And of course, they would rather have Japan take them over than Great Britain or France. So, yeah.
A bomb blew up a Japanese train in Manchuria, giving them an excuse to launch an invasion and take over. So here's the situation. Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Japan all believe they're racially superior, all feel hostility towards the Allies, and all want to militarize and take over more stuff. And so they did. Let's start with Germany. Hitler hated the Treaty of Versailles, and now he was ready to begin undoing it. In complete violation of the treaty, the first Luftwaffe squadrons were set up, conscription was introduced, and he pimped up his army. The Allies did nothing. Then Hitler sent his army back into the demilitarized Rhineland, giving orders to immediately retreat if the Allies showed up. The Allies did nothing. With his military re-strengthened, he could now move
pushing
on to
the boundaries.
2. He wanted to rapidly increase the Aryan population, and to do so, he needed Lebensraum. Or in other words, he would have to take over the world. But for now, a good portion...
Yeah, Lebensraum and the known Drang nach Osten, that was a major part of his ideology and the ideology of the Nazi Party. So they were saying, like Drang nach Osten, to the east, they thought that Jews and Slavs like Polish people, Russians, Czechs, Slovaks, Croats, Serbs, and so on, that they are Untermenschen, so lower or less valuable people, and they wanted to either expel them, enslave them, or just get rid of them, and then to populate all the area with Germans, and then to make a Greater German Aryan race and state. But yeah.
Portion of Europe would do, and he began eyeing up his neighbors. The Allies finally started to get worried, so they implemented a fairly useless diplomatic strategy called appeasement, and it went a little something like this. Hitler would say, I want that thing, and the Allies would say,
Austria.
You can't have that thing. Okay, you can have that thing, but no more. I want that thing. And repeat. In 1938, Hitler's army marched into Austria and just took it, with no resistance. Boom, this is Germany now. Next, he demanded to be given the Sudetenland, an area of Czechoslovakia with many ethnic Germans. The Allies held a meeting with Hitler in Munich and said, look, we're going to give you what... Hang on. This meeting is about my territory. Shouldn't I come to the meeting too?
No.
Anyway, we're going to give you what you want. Really? Yeah. Just like that? Yep. What's the catch? Just sign this piece of paper promising you won't invade the rest of Czechoslovakia. Okay. Then Chamberlain returned home victorious, waving his signed piece of paper in the air, declaring crisis to be averted and the continuation of world peace. And we built a statue of Chamberlain in his honor, and every day on the 30th of September we celebrate Chamberlain Day. Hitler's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. What? He's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. Oh. You lied to me. What do you expect? I'm Hitler. Not to be outdone.
With the president of the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia back then was Edvard Beneš. I think I pronounced it correctly. And he actually didn't want to give up territory of Czechoslovakia, and he was actually preparing for war. But then, as he noticed that the Western powers, Great Britain and France, with their appeasement policy, wouldn't back him in a military conflict with Germany, he eventually gave up and then resigned. But Germany also focused not only because of the Sudetenland. Of course, the ideology was saying, all Germans in one state, and the Sudetenland had a lot of ethnically Germans, so they wanted it, of course. But they also wanted the rest of the Czech Republic, especially the Czech Republic, because the Czech Republic was known because of its tank production, especially of light tanks. And today there's the same factory or name or brand, whatever, but they produce cars and they're called Škoda. I don't know if Americans know the brand, but Škoda is a very known car brand in Europe. But they produce tanks, and Hitler's idea was, if they take the Czech Republic, they can take the industry where the tanks are produced, and then the tanks would be produced for the German army, which would then advance or help the German army to take more land.
Mussolini also wanted to get in on the action. He thought to himself, isn't there a not yet colonized nation somewhere which is so underdeveloped that the people would be defending themselves against our tanks with literal bows and arrows and wooden spears?
Yeah, that actually happened.
Fantastic. And so he took it. Italy also wanted to control the entrance to the Adriatic Sea, so they occupied Albania. Then, in another incident which was maybe staged by the Japanese, gunfire was exchanged by Japanese and Chinese troops at the Marco Polo Bridge, and the Japanese launched yet another invasion against China. They swept through Beijing and Shanghai, and then advanced through the Yangtze Valley to China's then capital, Nanking. It was here that saw the worst of Japan's shocking atrocities committed against the Chinese people. Back in Europe, Germany and Italy made their relations.
We in Europe, we focus more, we're more Eurocentric, and we focus more on the atrocities that happened in the European continent. And a lot of times we forget about all the other atrocities that happened around the world, and especially the atrocities that the Japanese were making upon Korean people and especially the Chinese. And it was actually the same ideology like that the Japanese had, the Germans had, and the Italians had, that they're the Übermenschen, so the supreme form of people, whatever, and that the acts that they're doing to the lesser humans doesn't count. It's like they saw them as cattle, as just animals in some way.
ship status official by signing the Pact of Steel. Then, Hitler turned his eyes towards Poland and the hated Polish corridor, splitting Germany in two. At this point, the Allies really had to put their foot down, and they warned him that an invasion of Poland would mean war. Hitler had planned to continue his advance eastward, but he didn't want to end up fighting a war on two fronts. So for now, he made an alliance with Stalin, saying, "How about we both invade Poland and split it between the two of us, and I definitely won't not refrain from not betraying you sometime in the future." Sounds good. This new alliance stunned the West. On the 1st of September 1939,
I wouldn't say that the pact was, the Ribbentrop-Molotov pact was actually an alliance. Yeah, it was it was actually a non-aggression pact. So the Soviets said, you don't attack us, don't attack each other. And then they would divide Eastern Europe in their influence spheres. Later on, like the Soviet Union would annex the Baltic states. They would also try they would also wage war on Finland with the Winter War, but it actually just split Eastern Europe, like the influence spheres in Eastern Europe. And you can also see that it wasn't a alliance in that form that when the Germans attacked and they went on the Russian side of the border that they agreed to, the Soviets then started to attack, and they confronted the Germans, and they were shooting each other and killing each other inside of Poland. So it wasn't just like a friendly pact, like, hey, let's just woo. But the Polish people, they were giving their best in resisting, but a two-front war between a weakened Poland and two superpowers, it was impossible for them to defend.
Of September 1939, German troops entered Poland, and Britain and France declared war on Germany.
Yep.
The Poles fought hard, but they were no match for the two giants crashing down on them from either side. Then came a period known as the Phony War, where everyone just sort of sat around not doing much. The French had launched a small invasion into the Saarland, but they maintained mostly defensive positions, and after a while decided to just turn around and call it a day. Speaking of France, the French were still super proud of their victory in World War I, and they hadn't really moved on from it. They still used horses, they dispatched messages by motorbike instead of using radio, orders from the commander-in-chief were usually pretty vague, and the troops were rarely inspected. They built a line of defenses along their German border, but didn't bother extending it all the way to the Channel, and they wouldn't launch artillery strikes against Germany out of fear of being retaliated against. In a war, they didn't want to attack the enemy. And at first the UK wasn't much better. Chamberlain still naively hoped that the war could be ended diplomatically. Instead of bombing raids, the RAF dropped propaganda leaflets over German cities, which one air marshal said likely did nothing but provide the continent with toilet paper for the duration of the war. They also only sent 200,000 men to France, while the French had mobilized millions. Both Britain and France wanted to avoid a repeat of the First World War, and so they wanted to keep the war as far from home as possible. So they turned their eyes north, towards Norway.
I just wanted to say regarding France, they were still stuck in that First World War mentality with the trench warfare and so on. But as we all know, the famous blitzkrieg that the Germans used. So the Germans were way faster to adopt to the new strategies and new technology and weapons. So that's why they were so efficient in the Western Front at the beginning. Norway in Denmark.
Wanted to keep the war as far from home as possible, so they turned their eyes north, towards Norway. Neutral Sweden was exporting iron ore to Germany through neutral Norway, so the Allies asked them if they could please stop exporting iron ore to Germany, but this request was refused. Then, the Soviet Union attacked Finland, so the Allies said, how about we land troops in Norway and move them across Sweden to go help out your good pal Finland, and along the way maybe take control of all your airfields. But Norway and Sweden still said no. So the UK mined the waters around Norway to force any transport ships into international waters, and they also attacked a German tanker they found in the area. Hitler realized what the Allies were up to, and he quickly moved to secure his supply of iron ore. He launched an invasion through Denmark into Norway. The Allies rushed to land...
It's called Operation Weserübung, like the invasion of Denmark and Norway. What Denmark did, that's actually also most of the time overlooked in history, but they... fought the Germans, I don't know how many days, but a few days. And during that time, they evacuated almost all the Jews that they had, because they knew what the Germans are doing to the Jews. They evacuated almost all the Jews to neighboring Sweden to protect them. And because Sweden was neutral during the war, they knew that the Jews would be probably safe in Sweden. But yeah, just a quick side note.
Troops at key ports along the coast, but Germany had taken control of Norway's airfield, and their air superiority decided the fight. The Allies had to retreat. After this slightly embarrassing failure, Chamberlain resigned and was replaced with Winston Churchill, who had a slightly different approach to dealing with the Germans.
Of
Hitler's
course,
overall
his
strategy
cigarette
was similar to Germany's First World War strategy. Attack France, defeat France, knocking out the UK in the process, then turn on the Soviet Union and win the war. During the Phony War, the Allies had given Hitler time to prepare his forces. Now, he was ready to attack. The Allies had wanted to place troops in Belgium, but Belgium had refused, and in a move that surprised pretty much no one, Hitler launched an invasion to get around France's defenses. The Allies charged into Belgium at full speed to meet the German invasion head-on, and it looked like a repeat of the First World War was coming. But this time, Hitler had a trick up his sleeve.
Yeah, Belgium is always like the front between France and Germany. Poor Belgium. Also in the First World War. But yeah.
Blitzkrieg. As the Germans
Blitzkrieg.
advanced, they sent thousands of refugees westward, slowing down the Allies. Then, to the south, the French had left the Ardennes, an area full of hills and forests, pretty underdefended, because they thought it was naturally impenetrable. Well, the Germans were about to penetrate it with everything they had. They smashed 50 Wehrmacht divisions through and encircled the Allied armies at lightning speed.
Dunkirk.
The best of the Allied forces were now trapped. The Germans squeezed in from all sides, taking out France's best armies and nearly wiping out the British too. But they managed to make a desperate last-minute escape at Dunkirk, with British civilian ships even making the perilous journey to bring their young men home. With most of the French forces depleted, the Germans...
Yeah, they evacuated, I think, approximately 200,000 British and French, like, Allied soldiers back to Britain, I think. And, yeah, it wasn't just like we talked in a video before. It wasn't just like the Germans letting the Brits go and to evacuate. They were fighting fiercely, and they were bombed and attacked by the Luftwaffe and the artillery constantly. Let's just go a little bit back.
Making the perilous journey to bring their young men home. With most of the French forces depleted, the Germans breezed through, taking Paris, and France fell. What the Germans couldn't do in World War I, Hitler had done just like that. Hitler hoped that with the fall of France, the UK would also lose hope and sue for peace. But quite annoyingly, it didn't, and he needed to secure the Western Front, so he tried to force them into submission
surrender.
with mind games. The UK were now all alone, and Hitler wanted to emphasize that.
There's also a great movie about Churchill and all the political fights that he had in the British Parliament about should we make a peace treaty with Germany, or should we continue the war with Germany while the invasion of France was happening and so on. But eventually the conservatives behind, also with the support of the opposition and Churchill, like the pro-war stance prevailed. So Churchill's pro-war stance, and that sign that he made that means victory. And he wanted to signal to the British people, like, yeah, we are going to get victorious out of here, out of the war.
Force them into submission with mind games. The UK were now all alone, and Hitler wanted to emphasize that. First of all, just before France fell, Italy finally declared war on the Allies, making the UK's situation even worse. Next, instead of just occupying all of France, Hitler occupied the coastal areas for defense, but allowed France to continue its existence as a German puppet state. This way, it looked like the UK's old ally had decided to switch sides. Hitler also hoped that the UK wouldn't attack any of her old allies' navy bases or colonies in Africa, giving Hitler an extra line of defense to the south. But the UK made sure to respond to this by sailing down to France's navy base in Algeria and wrecking a bunch of ships. So have at it. Hitler then began laying down plans for an invasion of Great Britain before German troops could land on British soil.
Yeah, that's known as the Operation Seelöwe. But they couldn't invade Great Britain because the Royal Air Force and the British Navy were way superior to the German, especially the Navy. They had some... The Germans had some successes in the early stages where they bombed a lot of cities and landing grounds inside of Great Britain, but eventually the Royal Air Force would just demolish the German Luftwaffe, and that was and the Germans lost a ton of airplanes in the attack on Great Britain. And a lot of historians agree that they never recovered from that battle, from the Battle of Britain.
Hitler then began laying down plans for an invasion of Great Britain. Before German troops could land on British soil, he would first need air and naval superiority across the Channel. Waves of German bombers came, while the completely outnumbered RAF worked bravely around the clock in an attempt to quell the German attacks. At first, the Luftwaffe targeted British ports and coastal facilities. Then it attacked RAF bases, crippling the RAF's ability to defend the nation. And it looked like Hitler's Great British invasion was coming. But then, Churchill ordered a small, pretty insignificant bombing raid over Berlin. It didn't do much damage, but Hitler was furious, and he immediately ordered the Luftwaffe to refocus its attacks on civilian targets in London. Children were sent off to the countryside away from their parents to avoid danger, and frequent trips to air raid shelters became a daily occurrence. But British morale held firm. Smiling, knitting, lounging casually, these people have balls of steel. This refocusing on London also gave the RAF
and that's also, as I said in one video, it had a counter effect. Like when you attack civilians, civilians get angry at you, let's say it that way. And the resistance even furthered. Like the Brits were determined to fight the Germans until the last man, like on the streets and on the streets, on the landing ground, on the beaches. But yeah.
Lounging casually, these people have balls of steel. This refocusing on London also gave the RAF breathing space to reorganize. So Hitler kind of shot himself in the foot there. Just the foot for now. Finally, the Luftwaffe sent one massive all-out attack on London, and the RAF successfully repelled it, destroying many of the German aircraft and placing air superiority firmly in British hands. Hitler's invasion had to be postponed, but the bombing of British cities continued for some time.
Yeah, maybe the most famous British plane was the Spitfire, with which they eliminated a ton of German planes. Oh, it's done. We're definitely going to continue with part 2 later on in another video. But yeah, okay, OverSimplified makes such good videos. I cannot even emphasize it. And just imagine how much work goes into that video. So that's why I always say go to the original video, give the original creator the credits that they deserve, because imagine how long it takes to make this video, and it's 12 minutes long. There's probably I don't know, a month of work behind that. Okay, so if you enjoyed this video and the commentary, please hit the subscribe button. Don't forget the ring bell. I'm going to cover also part 2, maybe today if I have the time, or tomorrow. So yeah, you can support the channel also via Patreon. The link is in the description below. And yeah, see ya.